The word guilty landed like a gunshot. Marcus didn't blink. Couldn't. He'd already returned the stolen money. Walked into the building at 6:43 a.m., dropped the envelope in a lockbox outside HR, and walked out. No one saw him. But someone else got caught. And now she was being cuffed in front of her son. The boy screamed. She didn't do anything. The bailiff held him back. His voice cracked like glass. The woman's face stayed frozen, pale, lips parted, stunned into stillness. But her eyes locked on Marcus like she knew. Like she'd been waiting for him to do the right thing. He hadn't. Now she was being dragged away. Her lawyer was yelling. The judge was banging his gavel. Reporters were already pushing through the doors. But Marcus stood there, silent, watching it happen. He walked out with the other jurors. Legs numb, hands useless. His own voice still echoed in his skull. Guilty as charged. Outside, cameras flashed. The street buzzed. He kept his head down and checked his phone. One message. Unknown number. You chose wrong. I know what you did. He stopped cold on the sidewalk. Looked around. No one looked back. Buzz. She trusted the silence. I won't. Third buzz. Photo attachment. Marcus. Clear as day. Walking out of the security office 6 days before the trial. Manila envelope in hand. Time-stamped. Unmistakable. His throat closed. That envelope had $27,000 inside. He'd taken it in pieces, transfer errors, fake invoices, cashbacks. Clean. Quiet. Then the audit hit. But she had the wrong keycard login at the wrong time. They blamed her. And Marcus said nothing. He should have confessed. Instead, he let a single mother take the fall. And now someone had proof. He darted into a nearby parking garage, heart hammering, concrete spinning. Thumbs trembling, he texted back. What do you want? The reply came instantly. Fix it. Or I will. No demand for money. No threat of blackmail. Just a choice. He stared at the phone, at the photo, at the message. Then he did what cowards do. He deleted all three, and walked away like the worst thing he ever did hadn't just come back from the dead. He lasted 4 hours before checking the courthouse website. Just long enough to sit through a meeting he barely heard, pretend to eat a sandwich he didn't taste, and fake small talk with a coworker whose name he still couldn't remember. But by the time he shut the door to his office, the guilt was pulsing in his skull like a second heartbeat. The conviction had already made local headlines. Jury finds woman guilty in company embezzlement scandal. Sentencing next week. There was a photo of her, eyes down, flanked by 2 bailiffs. Her son was blurred out, but Marcus didn't need the pixels to see the heartbreak. He closed the tab. Couldn't look. A knock at the glass. His manager poked her head in, cheerful. Hey, just a reminder, you've got the interview with procurement in 15. Boardroom B. He nodded too quickly. Right. Thanks. She smiled and disappeared. Marcus pulled his tie loose. Breathed. Fixed nothing. The interview was a formality, a bump to a higher rung, bigger budget, more oversight. Irony tasted bitter. He told himself to focus. Just get through it. Boardroom B had 3 people waiting. 2 execs. 1 HR rep. All smiles and handshake energy. Marcus, good to see you again. He smiled. Saturday. First question. How do you handle ethical conflicts in high-pressure situations? His throat dried instantly. I believe in transparency, he said, too fast. If something feels off, you don't wait. You speak up. Someone nodded approvingly. Someone else wrote it down. He could barely hear the next question. There was a buzzing in his pocket. He ignored it. Another buzz. Another. He finally pulled the phone out under the table casually, like he was silencing it. New message. Same number. Turn on your TV. Channel 9. Now. He pocketed the phone and exhaled hard through his nose. I'm so sorry, he said, standing mid-question. Emergency. Give me 1 moment. He left the room without waiting for permission. Down the hall. Into a side lounge. Turned on the wall-mounted TV. Channel 9. Local news. A woman in a blue blazer stood in front of the courthouse steps. Was convicted yesterday afternoon in a verdict that shocked her attorney and family. But what's not being reported, what we're hearing from an anonymous source, is that key evidence was quietly returned days before trial. Money, allegedly the full amount, placed in a department Dropbox without explanation. Surveillance footage was incomplete, but the timing raises questions. Marcus went cold. They weren't naming him. Not yet. But someone had lit the fuse. His phone buzzed again. Still time to tell the truth before someone else does. Tick-tock. He turned the TV off. Just stood there, alone, the room too quiet. Then he walked to the bathroom, locked the stall, sat on the toilet lid like a man waiting for a sentence he hadn't heard yet. His hands shook. Not from fear, from clarity. The story was out. It wasn't loud yet, but it would be. Someone was trying to force his hand, drag him toward decency. He looked at his reflection in the cracked metal of the stall door. Pale. Pinched. A version of himself he couldn't sell anymore. The phone buzzed once more. She has a son. You looked him in the eye. Then you turned away. He stood up. Walked out. Skipped the interview room entirely. He went to his desk, grabbed his coat, left the building without a word. His car was parked underground. He unlocked it. Paused. Something was off. Nothing broken. Nothing stolen. But there was something on the driver's seat. A folder. Plain. No label. He opened it. Inside, a copy of the photo. His face. The envelope. And a handwritten note on lined paper. Confess. Or she gets the rest of it. Names. Times. Everything. You think this ends with her? You're just the start. He sat in the car with the door open, air biting his face, and made a choice. He picked up his phone. Not to confess. To call the one person he'd hoped never to involve. His brother picked up on the second ring. Hey, what's up? I need you to come over tonight, Marcus said. I think I'm in trouble. His brother was silent for a moment. What kind of trouble? The kind that doesn't go away. He hung up, started the engine, and drove home, knowing the truth was now a countdown, and he was almost out of time. The photo was already on the kitchen table when Marcus got home. No envelope. No note. Just the same image. Him leaving the security office, time-stamped, unforgiving, laid out like a threat and a mirror. He stared at it without touching it. The front door still open behind him. Keys still in his hand. He locked the door, set the keys down, and paced. 3 laps around the kitchen before he stopped pretending to think. He grabbed a beer from the fridge, stared at it, then shoved it back. 20 minutes later, his brother showed up. Jesus, Darren muttered the moment he stepped inside. You look like you're being haunted. I might be, Marcus said, nodding toward the table. Darren walked over, picked up the photo, whistled low. You want to explain this? Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. I took the money. A while ago. Put it back. Quiet. Thought it was over. It's not. I know. Darren stared at him, then dropped the photo on the table like it was radioactive. So you let someone else take the hit? Marcus didn't answer. Was it worth it? Darren asked. No, he said. It never was. They sat in silence for a beat, the kind that presses down on your spine. I need to ask you something, Marcus said. No, Darren said immediately. I'm not helping you cover this up. I'm not asking you to. Darren tilted his head, waiting. I just need you to be here when I tell the truth. That's it. Yeah, I don't want to do it alone. Darren didn't speak right away. Finally, he said, that woman, she have kids? Marcus nodded. A teenage son. He watched it happen. Whole thing. Darren's expression shifted. You saw him and still didn't say anything? Marcus swallowed. He looked at me like I might stop it. Like I might fix it. And you didn't. No, Marcus said. I didn't. Darren exhaled through his nose, shook his head. What do you think this makes you? Marcus didn't flinch. A coward. The words sat there. You planning to go to the cops? Darren asked. I think I have to. You think that's enough? No, Marcus said quietly. But it's the only thing left that isn't nothing. Darren crossed his arms. You think they'll believe you? I don't know. What if they don't? Then at least it's out there, Marcus said. At least I stop hiding. Darren studied him a second longer. Then said, You want me to go with you? Marcus nodded. Tomorrow. First thing. Another long pause. Darren nodded once. Okay. They sat for a while after that. No TV. No drinks. Just the weight of everything unsaid. Before Darren left, he stood in the doorway, hand on the knob, and looked back. You're doing the right thing, he said. Even if it's late. Marcus didn't say thank you. Just nodded. After he left, Marcus sat at the kitchen table alone. Looked at the photo again. He flipped it over. Something was scribbled on the back in quick, blocky handwriting. She's not the only one. This goes deeper than you. He stared at it for a long time, heart in his throat, and realized whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to scare him. They were trying to expose something bigger. And now he wasn't sure if confessing would be the end of it, or just the beginning. The building didn't look like a police station, more like a DMV with worse lighting. Marcus stood just inside the entrance, hands cold, every instinct telling him to walk out before he made a mistake he couldn't undo. Darren was already at the counter, asking for someone in investigations, like this was just another errand. Marcus stayed near the wall, watching a guy in a hoodie fill out a complaint form with the kind of calm you only had if you weren't about to detonate your entire life. A uniformed officer waved him toward a hallway. Detective Norwood will see you in room 2. They followed her down a corridor that smelled like coffee and stress. The room was small, just a table, 3 chairs, and a cheap digital clock that ticked louder than it should have. Marcus sat facing the door. Darren sat beside him, not saying much, just breathing like backup. A few minutes later, Norwood walked in. Late 40s, tired eyes, a folder under her arm. She didn't smile. Just pulled out a notepad and said, "Tell me what you're here for." Marcus hesitated. Darren cleared his throat. He has something to confess. Norwood looked at Marcus. Your voice, not his. Marcus nodded. There was a theft. At my company. I took the money. I replaced it before the trial started. But someone else got blamed. Her pin didn't move. How much? 27,000. When? Marcus gave the dates. The account. The exact days the fake invoices went through. You returned the full amount, she asked. Yes. Anonymously. But security footage, someone has it. A photo. It's how I know I've been found out. And you're only coming forward now because I didn't stop it. I let them convict her. I watched it happen. I knew it was wrong, but I said nothing. She finally started writing. Her name. He gave it. Norwood sat back, studying him. You realize how this looks, right? You come forward after the trial, after the conviction, and say you were the real thief? You're either lying to protect her, or you're trying to dodge something bigger. I'm not lying. Prove it. I can show you everything. The file path. The invoices. I kept copies. You kept copies, she said flatly. In case I couldn't keep lying. She stared at him for a long time. Then she stood. Stay here. She left with the file. Darren didn't speak until the door shut behind her. You okay? He asked. No, Marcus said. But I'm not hiding anymore. They sat in silence. 20 minutes passed. Maybe more. Norwood returned with another officer who said nothing, just stood by the door. Norwood dropped a printout in front of him. It was the photo. Same one. Marcus leaving the security office, timestamp visible. Anonymous source sent it last night, she said. But with no context. Now we have context. Marcus looked at the printout. That's what pushed me to come in. Norwood leaned forward. You said someone else has this. Someone who sent you messages. He nodded. Texts? A folder left on my car seat. They know everything. Did they ask for money? No. Just to fix it. She raised an eyebrow. You think that's all this is about? He hesitated. Then he pulled the note from his jacket, the one scrawled on the back of the photo. She read it twice. She's not the only one. This goes deeper than you. Norwood's voice dropped. Do you know what that means? No, Marcus said. But it sounds like whoever this is, they're not just after me. She exchanged a look with the officer by the door, then said something Marcus hadn't expected. We've had other cases, same company. Quiet terminations, no charges, all buried. This might not be a confession. This might be a lead. Marcus blinked. You think they've done this before? I think your silence let them do it again. She stood. We'll contact the DA. If what you say checks out, they'll reopen the case. And me. You'll be charged, she said. You won't walk away clean. I'm not asking to, Marcus said. Norwood paused in the doorway. You just asking to stop running? He nodded. She gave him a look, not approval, not sympathy. Just a tiny flicker of respect. Then she said, I'll be in touch. Marcus left the station with his chest tight and his future unclear. But for the first time in weeks, he wasn't waiting for the knock. He'd opened the door himself. The call came 2 days later, just after midnight. Marcus was lying on the couch, still dressed, TV glowing without sound. His phone buzzed once. No ID. No voicemail. Just the kind of late-hour disturbance that never meant anything good. He called back. A man answered on the third ring. Calm, clipped voice. You went to the police. Marcus sat up. Who is this? That's not important. What matters is what you just started. I told the truth, Marcus said, pulse kicking. No, the voice said. You cracked the door open. You haven't told them about the others yet. You still think this is about you. Marcus stood, walked to the window. His street was empty. No headlights. No figures. What others? He asked. You already know the names. You saw the transactions. You flagged one last year and buried it. Marcus felt the breath catch in his throat. Yeah, the voice said, catching the silence. You didn't steal alone. You just got caught alone. Marcus gripped the edge of the windowsill. Why are you doing this? Because this company destroys people quietly. Because you helped them do it. And because she was supposed to walk free. You saw her kid. You still turned away. What do you want from me? To finish what you started. Full list. Every manipulated transaction. Every buried complaint. Every co-conspirator. You think I kept that? You're not stupid, Marcus. The line clicked dead. He stared at the phone, then at his computer, then back again. He hadn't looked at those files in over a year. They were encrypted, buried in a subfolder on an old backup drive. Names, dates, breakdowns of where money vanished and whose login was used. Some were accidents. Others weren't. A few flagged by Marcus himself, briefly, quietly, before someone in upper finance told him not to worry about it. Already resolved, they'd said. Don't dig. He'd stopped digging. He retrieved the drive from the drawer, plugged it in, and stared at the folders lighting up on the screen like ghosts. There it was. Internal_archive_do_not_use. Inside, more files than he remembered. Darren called around 8 a.m. You okay? He asked. I think there's more, Marcus said. Worse. A pattern. You going back to the cops? I don't know yet. What do you mean? You don't know? Marcus hesitated. If I take this to them, it blows the whole place up. People lose jobs, careers, reputations. And if you don't, then someone else does it. Someone who doesn't care how clean it looks. Darren was quiet a moment. Then he said, this company let you take the fall. They let a woman get locked up to keep the books looking pretty. You really think they deserve a clean exit? Marcus didn't answer. You're trying to protect people who wouldn't hesitate to bury you, Darren added. Why? Marcus exhaled, sat back in the chair. Because I don't know who I become if I blow up the whole building. I lied. I already broke something. Do I really get to be the one who decides what breaks next? Darren's voice softened. Maybe this isn't about breaking anything. Maybe it's about pulling out the rot before it spreads. That stuck. After the call, Marcus printed a single sheet of names, 5 employees whose fingerprints were all over similar thefts. One of them was a department head. Another had quietly resigned a month after a red flag Marcus was told to ignore. He put the printout in a folder and stared at it like it might bite. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He drafted an email to the woman who'd taken his fall. He found her attorney's name in the court file. Subject line, there's more you don't know. He attached the original receipt, the returned money, time-stamped, and a signed statement with everything he'd told the detective. He hovered his cursor over the send button. His phone buzzed again. A new number. Just one line. We're not all scared of the truth like you were. He had sinned. And for the first time, it didn't feel like an unraveling. It felt like a beginning. The company sent an email that afternoon. Subject line, urgent HR matter, immediate action required. It came from someone Marcus had never spoken to, a director he didn't even know existed. The message was polite, but sharp. A mandatory meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. Monday. Please bring all relevant documentation, it read. No other context. He didn't reply. Just closed the laptop and sat in silence, the room suddenly too quiet. He could hear the fridge humming, a clock ticking somewhere in the apartment. Everything felt too still, like the world was holding its breath, waiting to see what he'd do next. At 6:12 p.m., the woman's lawyer emailed back. Received. Thank you. We're filing an emergency appeal first thing in the morning. No emotion. No validation. But it was something. And that night, for the first time since the trial, Marcus slept. Not well, not deeply, but without flinching awake at 3 a.m. soaked in guilt. Saturday passed in slow motion. He didn't leave the apartment. Didn't open the blinds. He just reviewed every document he still had. Everything he'd flagged and buried. All the pieces that pointed to a company with a long history of quiet theft and calculated scapegoats. He wasn't the only one. He was just the one who cracked first. Sunday afternoon, someone knocked. He opened the door, expecting Darren. It wasn't. It was her son, taller than he remembered. Eyes sharper. He didn't say a word, just held out a phone, already playing a video. Marcus took it, hands shaking. It was security footage from a hallway camera, dated 2 months before the trial. It showed a man in a suit. Marcus recognized him immediately, mid-level exec, slipping into a locked file room at 2 a.m., carrying a company laptop. No authorization. No explanation. The video cut out at the 15-second mark. I thought you should see it, the boy said quietly. Marcus handed the phone back. Where did you get this? The boy didn't answer. Does your mom know you came here? He shook his head. She doesn't know I have the footage either. Marcus looked at him, really looked. Why are you doing this? The boy's voice was calm. Too calm. Because I watched you lie. And I still wanted you to be better than what you did. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness, not grace. Just clarity. The kind that strips away every excuse until all that's left is the truth. You don't owe me anything, Marcus said. I know, the boy replied. But you owe her everything. Then he turned and walked away. Marcus stood in the doorway long after he was gone. He could have closed the door and pretended it didn't happen. He could have let the company meeting come and gone, said the bare minimum, saved himself. Instead, he opened a blank document. Title: Internal Irregularities, Full Disclosure. He listed everything. Every false expense, every shady transfer, every time someone told him to look the other way. Then he attached the hallway footage. He copied the detective, the lawyer, and, after a long hesitation, the local news desk that first broke the story. He hit send. And this time, he didn't delete the proof. He printed it, all of it, and packed it into a plain folder. At the bottom, he placed a sticky note with 7 words. I was silent. She paid for it. Then he waited for Monday to arrive. Not afraid, just ready. They tried to make him wait. When Marcus arrived Monday morning, folder in hand, heart pounding beneath a calm mask, the receptionist offered him a seat and a weak smile. They're finishing up another meeting. Someone will come get you shortly. He didn't sit, just said, tell them I'll only wait 10 minutes. After that, I walked this down to the police myself. 5 minutes later, they sent someone. The HR director greeted him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marcus, thanks for coming in. Let's talk in conference room 4. The room was cold, tidy. 2 other people were already inside, one from legal, one from operations. They didn't introduce themselves, just nodded as he took a seat. We've reviewed your recent communications, the legal rep began. Some very serious accusations. They're not accusations, Marcus said. They're documented events. He slid the folder across the table. Everything's in there. Timestamps, transactions, emails I was told to ignore. And the footage. They didn't touch it. Just looked at each other. The HR director leaned forward. Marcus, we appreciate you bringing these concerns to our attention. I'm not here for appreciation. Then what are you here for? He held her gaze. Accountability. A beat of silence passed. The operations rep cleared his throat. Some of what you're alleging, if true, would require external audit and potentially legal review. That's not a quick process. I'm aware. Why now? The legal rep asked. Why not months ago? Marcus didn't hesitate. Because I was afraid. Because I thought if I stayed quiet, I'd keep my job, my record, my life. And I was wrong. They all looked back at him, unblinking. Are you aware that your own actions may result in criminal charges? I am, Marcus said. But she shouldn't be sitting in a cell for something I did. And I'm not the only one who knew what was happening. I was just the one who finally broke. Another silence. Longer this time. We'll need time to review all of this, the HR director said, voice clipped. And we strongly advise you not to speak with the press until we've. I already did. That landed. She blinked. Excuse me. I sent everything to a reporter this morning. Local news. They've been following the trial. They'll be following this too. You understand what that does to your position here? He nodded. It ends it. She sat back, eyes narrow. And yet you came in anyway. Because this company taught me how to lie. How to cover for people in better suits. And I believe that staying silent made me smart. But all it made me was complicit. The operations rep side. We're not denying there have been oversights. But a coordinated conspiracy? That's a strong word. Then prove me wrong, Marcus said, standing. I'm not here to fight anymore. I'm just here to stop pretending. They didn't stop him as he walked out. No security escort. No whispered threats. He left the building and stepped into sunlight that felt sharper than he remembered. His heart wasn't calm, but it wasn't panicked either. Just steady. Focused. Like it finally had permission to beat without lying about the cost. His phone buzzed as he reached the sidewalk. It was from her lawyer. Appeal approved. Retrial scheduled. She's going home. He stopped walking, stared at the screen, then turned around and headed in the opposite direction. Not toward work, not toward home. Toward the courthouse. Because he had one more thing to say. And this time, he wanted to say it under oath. They didn't put him on the stand right away. The retrial moved faster than anyone expected. New evidence, faulty jury selection, a signed confession. Every piece forced through the system like a pressure valve about to blow. The prosecution had no choice but to back down. The judge vacated the conviction before the end of the week. She walked out of the courtroom in a gray coat, thinner than she'd looked the first time. Her son was waiting for her by the exit. She didn't cry. She didn't hug anyone. Just paused at the threshold like someone unsure if the world would let her keep walking. Marcus stood by the last row of benches, watching. He wasn't part of the hearing, just a witness, an outsider to her freedom. She turned her head slightly, met his eyes. He didn't smile, didn't wave, but he didn't look away. She nodded once, barely perceptible, and then walked out with her son. He sat down, alone, in the quiet that followed. Later that day, Detective Norwood called. "You're lucky," she said. "The DA's not pressing charges." Marcus didn't respond. She added, "But don't confuse that with innocence. You're walking out clean, but not untouched." "I know. Still want to help us dig through the rest of it?" He hesitated, then said, "Yeah, I owe it." After the call, he didn't go home. He drove across town and parked outside a small nonprofit legal aid office. Just a brick building with a peeling sign and a lobby that smelled like printer toner and hand sanitizer. He'd sent them his resume a few days earlier, half expecting it to disappear into a digital void. But they'd replied, "Come in. We could use someone who understands what it means to stay quiet and what it costs." Inside, a woman handed him a clipboard. "You'll be reviewing intake files, listening, helping people tell the truth on paper before they have to say it out loud." He nodded. "I can do that." As he sat at his new desk, bare walls, donated furniture, the hum of a nearby copy machine, he pulled a notebook from his bag, the same one he used to write the first list that mattered. At the top of a new page, he wrote, "I told the truth. Not because I'm brave. Because I ran out of ways to live with the lie." He paused, then wrote the next line. "And I'm still here, even if no one claps." He closed the notebook. Didn't need applause. Didn't need redemption. He just needed a reason to keep showing up. That was enough. Because the truth didn't fix everything. But it gave him back the one thing he never thought he'd earn. The right to start over. And he wasn't wasting it.